Navid,
Yes, sir.
so many people are demanding for Indian Express. What we need to do?
Are you really looking at these?
Yes, I am.
Why, sir? As in just to ask.
These are our students, and we need to do something for their expectation as well as requirement.
Are you serious? I'm sorry to ask, but are you serious?
Yes, I am serious.
Are you serious? The thing which I'm thinking, are you also thinking the same?
Yes, I'm thinking the same. Let's do Indian Express. What do you think?
How?
Who? That's a difficult question to answer. Let's do one thing. Let's call everyone for a meeting and decide what to do next. So, my dear team, we have decided to do Indian Express explain section. So, what are your thoughts? How to do it? कैसे करें इसको?
So first thing we should not repeat the topics that have already been covered in the DNS.
Very valid point. Repetition.
So then what?
That we have to think about. It's a team to talk about. Yes. Anything else?
I think we should be doing it on a weekly basis. So whatever we are covered in the DNS from, or not covered in the DNS from the Indian Express section, we can cover it in the next week.
Yes. Actually, timing is very important. So we can do it on a weekly basis. If we do it weekly basis, it will be less of work as well, no? Isn't it? That's what I think. So who is going to do this, or who is going to take this responsibility? Oh, well, wonderful. Congratulations, man. You've taken the lead. You will be going to lead this product. Indian Express explain section weekly basis. You are starting. All the best.
So, as all of you witness that I have been quote unquote chosen for this first video of explained section of Indian Express. And so, let us now begin this discussion where we have taken up the news appearing in the Indian Express in the first week of February 2021. As you can see on the screen, we have taken 7 very important news articles which unfortunately were not published in the Hindu newspaper. So let us now begin the discussion. This next important explained article which we have taken is from 5th of February 2021. Ship recycling in Alang. What is its capacity and can it attract more aging ships from Europe and Japan? So in her budget speech, Union Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman spoke about doubling the ship recycling capacity by 2024 and attracting more ships to India from Europe and Japan. And so what we are going to do is that first, since it becomes very important from the perspective of prelims examination, we will understand few geographical facts about Alang, where it is located, what is the current challenges which it is facing with respect to the compliance with rules and regulations, why we need to break down a ship, what are the factors because of which a lot of ships are destroyed in India, and then finally what issues are faced due to this large industry which has developed in Gujarat, and then finally what are the solutions to this problem. And so let us now begin by first understanding the location of Alang. So as you can see on the map, Alang is located in Bhavnagar district in Gujarat, and it opens into Gulf of Khambat. And around half of the world's overall ships which are destroyed in near are recycled at Alang. An important interesting fact is that very near to it is a proposed site for a new nuclear power plant which will be known by the name of Meethi Virdi nuclear power plant. Of course, it is a proposed and it is yet to be constructed. Now an important fact is that at Alang, most of the ships that arrive to be broken down are registered in tax havens like Panama and Barbados. And this means that India is missing out on a major chunk of this business because ship owners in European Union own 35% of the merchant vessels of the world. Similarly, Japanese also have a very large fleet. However, these ship owners from Japan and European Union do not send their ships to be broken down in Alang, and the reason behind that is the strict regulations and norms related to dismantling of aging ships in these countries. Because European Union norms require categorization and tracking of every pollutant from the ship till it is safely disposed of. So EU wants a record of every pollutant on the ship. They want these pollutants to be documented and disposed of safely. And currently, ship recyclers at Alang do not do regular follow-ups with the authorized agencies who have asked to dispose of the pollutant. Apart from that, there are some other health requirements related to the laborers which are employed in this industry, which EU requires or mandates, which are not followed at Alang, and that is why the ships from Europe or registered in European Union do not come to Alang to be destroyed. And so, why is there a need to break up a ship? We know ship consists mostly of steel. At the end of its useful life, it becomes a source of ferrous scrap. The scrap is particularly reprocessed for manufacturing simple steel products such as steel rods used in civil engineering. And so, a large portion of the waste generated following the demolition or scrapping process is largely returned to good use. Apart from that, usable equipment such as pumps, motors, and generators are also made available to be used in some secondary industries. And so you can see that even if the ship has aged, the high quality of its equipment as well as the steel become available to be used in secondary industries. And so that is why this industry is not only a good source of raw material, but it also enables export of services, the service of breaking down a ship. And now, why is India so famous with respect to the braking industry? And that can be summed up in two words: lowest cost. Because in India, the cost of breaking down the ship is very low because you have readily available cheap labor. There are hardly any restrictions, or even if they are not implemented on buyers and sellers. And as far as regulations related to any industries are concerned, this particular industry is least regulated, not only in terms of labor laws, for example, no medical insurance of workforce. Then as far as damage to environment is concerned, no record is kept as to what toxic chemicals are being disposed in the open sea. And finally, there are no rules and regulations with respect to the waste disposal in Alang. And so that is why India becomes such a hub for recycling of ships. But a major chunk of business is being missed out because of lack of standards being set up by European Union. And so let us just see what are the issues which are being faced by Alang and surrounding areas due to lack of these rules and regulations in this particular industry. We know that shipbreaking industry is hazardous to both workers in terms of their health and environment in terms of pollution. And let us now begin with the environment first. As ships are broken into pieces, there needs to be a proper storage for scraps, which is mostly lacking in Alang. And since there are no storage for scraps, it leads to improper disposal in the sea. And we know that ships contain very toxic materials like asbestos, heavy metals, polychlorinated biphenyl, hydrocarbons, and various other innumerable toxic elements. And lack of proper procedure to dispose of all these toxic materials leads to release of toxic chemicals in the open waters, which then threatens the biodiversity of the region directly. This is also a violation of Basel Convention because it demands that all such yards separate hazardous and non-hazardous waste and have appropriate storage units for each of the toxic materials. And since this is not followed, this puts India in the category of violators of Basel Convention. Then let us talk about the issues related to health of the workers. We know that the personal protective equipments are one of the most basic needs of any industry, and particularly the shipbreaking industry, which is totally ignored in India. And these basic needs are not catered to as far as the workers and laborers in this particular industry is concerned. Apart from that, breaking these ships down to the ground using just a simple hammer and bare hands leads to the exposure to toxic chemicals, most of which are carcinogenic in nature, and so in the long term it impacts the health of the workers. And so in this regard, let us discuss the steps taken by the government in this regard. So making its intentions clear, the central government in 2019 passed Recycling of Ships Act, which is an act to provide for the regulation of recycling of ships by setting certain standards and laying down the statutory mechanism for enforcement of such standards. Both these two things have been done and the guidelines have been issued by the central government. Also, there is something which is known by the name of Hong Kong International Convention for Safe and Environmentally Sound Recycling of Ships. And India has recently given accession to this particular convention, which will help country attract more and more aging vessels. Now the country just have to make sure that all the standards and norms being specified in Basel Convention, although included in this particular act, are enforced on ground. So if we talk about the current statistics, around 90 yards in Alang are HKC compliant, And as gradually more and more yards become compliant to these conventions, a number of Japanese and European owners will be open to selling their ships to India to be broken down in Alang. So this discussion was extremely pertinent from UPSC point of view. One is the location of Alang, issues related to shipbuilding industry, and what government has done in order to solve these problems. Let us now move on to the next discussion. So the first news which we have taken up appears in the explained section on 6th of February 2021. What is a square kilometer array? World's largest radio telescope. Unlike optical telescopes, radio telescopes can detect invisible gas and therefore they can reveal areas of space that may be obscured or hidden by cosmic dust. And this is a very important news, especially for science and tech section prelims examination. And just to give you an example, in 2019, UPSC had asked, recently scientists observed the merger of giant black holes billions of light years away from the Earth. What is the significance of this observation? And the answer was, of course, the gravitational waves were detected. The LIGO detectors discovered the first gravitational waves produced by two giant merging black holes in 2016. And so you can easily understand that events like these are just not important from the factual point of view, but it is also important to have the conceptual clarity of these concepts. And so in this regard, we are first going to understand what radio waves are, what are the advantages of using radio telescopes, but at the same time there are some issues as well, and how these issues are being resolved in Square Kilometer Array, which is the world's largest radio telescope under construction. So as you can clearly see on your screen, there is an image, and this is an image of electromagnetic spectrum arranged in the order of frequency or wavelength, and you can clearly see the visible light spectrum over there. And if you see, the radio spectrum is towards the left side, which means it has a lower frequency but a very high wavelength as compared to the visible light. So radio waves make up part of electromagnetic spectrum. They are a kind of electromagnetic spectrum. These waves are packets of energy with differing wavelengths. Since they are electromagnetic radiation, they travel at the speed of light, just like visible light. And so when we talk about Square Kilometer Array, which is the world's largest radio telescope, this telescope is going to detect radio waves. So just as optical telescopes collect visible light, bring it to a focus, amplify it and make it available for analysis by various instruments, so do radio telescopes collect weak radio light waves, bring it to focus, amplify it and make it available for analysis. We use radio telescopes to study naturally occurring radio light from stars, galaxies, black holes and other astronomical objects. And now the question arises that why do we utilize radio waves to study stars, galaxies and black holes instead of normal telescopes, very powerful telescopes available? And that is because of few advantages which the radio waves and radio telescopes provide over other kind of telescopes. And let's understand these reasons. The first and foremost reason is that radio telescopes can detect cool clouds of hydrogen gas in space. These large clouds of gases are important because they are the birthplace of stars. Large clouds of hydrogen gas do not produce visible light and so are invisible to optical telescopes. But they do emit radio waves at a specific wavelength, allowing detection by radio telescopes. And so when we want to study stars, galaxies and black holes, our natural choice is nothing but the radio telescopes. The second important reason is that radio waves are not blocked by clouds and are unaffected by the Earth's atmosphere. Thus, radio telescopes can receive signals during cloud cover as well. So once a radio telescope is established, weather phenomena have very small impact on them except for when very strong winds are blowing. But apart from that, they are unaffected by cloud covers. The third important reason is that radio waves are unaffected by the dust particles in the space. Light waves are scattered by these dust particles and so never make it to Earth for detection. Whereas radio waves with their much longer wavelengths, remember that diagram which we studied for frequency and wavelength, and we saw how radio waves have higher wavelength than the visible light. And so these radio waves with their much longer wavelengths are unhindered by these tiny dust particles and travel the vast distances across space to Earth. giving radio astronomers unobscured or unhindered view. And then finally, visible telescopes can only be used during the night time because the overwhelming presence of the sun during the daytime makes it impossible to observe any telescopic or astronomical phenomena during the daytime. Whereas with radio waves and with radio telescopes, you can make observations both during the day as well as in the night time. Now, if radio telescopes are so great, why is not each and every city and country is installing them? First, of course, is the reason that they are very expensive. But apart from them, there are some conceptual reasons as well. Now here you need to focus on two things. We have understood that they have high wavelength and so they have low frequency. And which means that they have very low energy photons. And so the radio waves received on Earth are very weak. And now you know that when we are using telescopes, we need to be able to differentiate between 2 or 3 or many particles from each other, and that is known as resolution, which is the ability of a radio telescope to distinguish fine details in the sky. And so you need very large collecting area to collect a lot of photons. And so that is why we don't use a single telescope. We use square kilometer array. Array means sequence of many telescopes. Because the idea is to combine the views of a group of antennas spread over a large area to operate together as one gigantic telescope. So, multiple telescopes observe the same radio source. We know what is the distance between each of them. And so the radio waves coming from the source will therefore arrive at one telescope at a slightly different time than the other. We see the slight difference in the way the waves show up, with one arriving slightly behind the other. And so the difference in time delay is the phase of the wave, and which is then used to calculate the exact distance of the astronomical phenomena, be it star, galaxy, or even a black hole. And the second problem is, of course, since they are very weak, even the smallest radio waves from Earth-based systems can produce great distortion. And so that is why these telescopes are located far away from settlements. And so if you combine these two requirements, having large collecting area or array of telescopes and far away from settlements, and that is why the recent meeting of SKAO or Square Kilometer Array Observatory Council, which conducted its meeting last week, has decided to put these arrays in Africa and Australia. These places having vast uninhabited lands which are far away from settlements. Although the exact location still not decided. So I hope this explanation gave you the conceptual clarity, but from the prelims perspective, it is important to understand few things about SKAO. So SKAO is a new intergovernmental organization dedicated to radio astronomy and is headquartered in UK. At the moment, there are 10 member countries of SKAO, and so the SKAO will try to resolve one of the most baffling issues related to astronomy and science. Some of these questions that the scientists hope to address using this telescope include the beginning of the universe, how and when the first stars were born, the life cycle of a galaxy, exploring the possibility of detecting technologically active civilizations elsewhere in our galaxy, and understanding where gravitational waves come from. So these shall be the aims of SKAO. In prelims examination, a basic question about this organization can be asked. Let us now move on to the next explained article. The next explained article which we have taken appeared in newspaper on February 4, 2021. Is it a bus? Is it a train? It's Metro Neo, the newest mass transport system for Nashik. So the central government recently urged all state governments to consider using Metro Neo technology in their Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. And not just that, a sizable budgetary allocation has been made in union budget for Metro Neo projects. And so in this regard, it becomes important for us to understand what Metro Neo is all about, what are the challenges which it addresses, because of which it becomes ideally suited for Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities, and how it withstands the comparison with other rapid transport system, for example BRTS, metro system, light rail transit system, and others. And so we'll ultimately derive the conclusion that Metro Neo is ideally suited for Tier 2 and 3 cities. So Metro Neo service consists of electric bus coaches. Their lengths varying from 18 to 25 meters and with a capacity of 200 to 300 passengers at a time. The buses will have rubber tires and their quality is at par with the metro trains. The important distinction between a normal bus and a Metro Neo bus is that they are electric coaches run on electric overhead traction where the overhead wires are available. If they are not available, they can also run on an internal battery, so they are just like electric vehicle where the overhead option is not available. Apart from that, where there is overhead traction available, they can charge themselves while providing or catering to the people. Now these Metro Neo have guided coaches for passenger safety which are also upgradable to LRT or light rail transit system. An important aspect of Metro Neo is that they have very small stations, not like mega stations which we have in Delhi Metro or in Bangalore, on which entry can be enabled from footpath. They can use normal telecom network to connect coaches, provide ticketing and smart passenger information system inside the coaches. And the global example shows that the kind of Metro Neo projects we have adopted has a successful past as well, where a lot of countries across the world are successfully running these projects since a long time, and this particular technology is available for more than 100 years. So what is it about Metro Neo which makes it suitable for smaller cities like Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities? First and foremost, unlike any other metro or local train system, you don't require any signaling mechanism. So no signaling system is required. Since the ticketing is done inside the train, there is no need for AFC or automated fare collection system gates which you see in the metro stations, which require a lot of expenditure. Since they run on rubber tires, there is no need to lay down the tracks. They're just like buses, so no bogie and no steel wheels. The stations are smaller and so a massive part of expenditure is cut down there as well. And their propulsion system is very small, which makes them cheaper to maintain them. So these are just theoretical aspects. But what are the hard facts as far as comparison of various rapid transport system available in India are concerned? And so let us compare important parameters like acceleration, PHPDT or passengers per hour per direction, passenger capacity, average speed, length, cost of construction per kilometer and completion time between these four options. As far as acceleration is concerned, there is not much difference between Metro Neo and other options. But if we talk about PHPDT or how many passengers per hour a particular system can take, Metro Neo stands in between the Metro, which has around 20,000 and BRT, which has 5,000. So that is in between these two. As far as passenger capacity is concerned, it is much better than BRT, lesser than Metro. Average speeds are comparable, but what is startling is the cost of construction and the time it takes to complete the construction. If we talk about the cost, it is much cheaper than the metro system, which is around 250 crore per kilometer. As compared to that, it costs around only 70 crores, so around 1/3 or 1/4 of that. And also, the construction of metro system takes around 4 to 5 years, where this particular system can be completed in a matter of 1.5 to 2 years. And so, cities which have lower traffic within 10,000 per direction per hour, this particular system is ideally suited, and that is why Nashik has become the first city. You can see that Nashik is a Tier 2 city for which this particular project has been approved. Chauri Chaura, freedom struggle signpost from 100 years ago. This explained appeared in the newspaper on 4th of February because Prime Minister Narendra Modi inaugurated the Chauri Chaura centenary celebrations and also released a postage stamp to mark the centenary of the event. And so the Chauri Chaura, which is a town in Gorakhpur district, about halfway between Gorakhpur and Devariya, and this is the map, and this is the pictorial representation of the incident which took place 100 years ago, which we are going to discuss very soon. And this particular explained highlights the importance of newspaper reading every day, because it helps you revise the static portion as static as history as well. As in when these important events complete 25, 50, 100, 200 years, a brief summary of them appears in the newspaper, which is more than sufficient for UPSC examination. Coming back to the topic of discussion, Chauri Chaura. This town has a small railway station which initially put Chauri Chaura on map. So everyone in India and in Britain knows Chauri Chaura because of this particular railway station and the police station. And the reason for that is the town was the scene of a violent incident and of far-reaching consequences during the freedom struggle a century ago. So what actually happened on 4th of February 1922? What happened was a large crowd of peasants set on fire the police station in Chauri Chaura, killing 22 policemen. And so, in order to understand why people did that, we have to understand the historical context. And we have to go 2 years back from 1922 in 1920. When Gandhiji had launched non-cooperation or Asahyog movement against the British government, which involved massive boycott of foreign goods, especially machine-made clothes, and legal, educational and administrative institutions as well. Because the idea was to refuse to assist a ruler who misrules. This was the ideology behind the boycott. And so as the movement gathered momentum over the next year and a half, large numbers of volunteers became active across the country. And this was the beginning of the Gandhian phase in India's struggle for independence, which involved massive level of people's participation in the movement. And so in the winter of 1921 and 22, volunteers of the Congress and the Khilafat movement were organized into National Volunteer Corps. And now moving to 1 month before the actual incident, in mid-January 1922, after a meeting addressed by a functionary of the Gorakhpur Congress and Khilafat committees, peasant officers were appointed to fill out pledges of non-cooperation, collect subscriptions and lead the picketing of shops selling foreign items. So what people did and what volunteers did is that they gathered around all those people who were working for the British government and asked them to actually take a pledge to not cooperate with the Britishers. And just before few days succeeding to February 4 incident, police cracked down on volunteers because Britishers did not like the idea of people forcing their own employees. And so police cracked down on volunteers who were trying to stop trade in foreign clothes and enforce a just price for meat and fish. And they severely beat up one person who was very important, known by the name of Bhagwan Ahir, who earlier had worked for Britishers as a part of Indian Army. And then finally, on the day of the incident, volunteers congregated in the town and after a meeting proceeded in a procession to the local police station and to picket the nearby Mundera Bazaar. Picketing basically means a group of people who stand outside a place as a protest or try to persuade others not to enter that place. Warning shots were fired by the police, but the people ignored. As one author has written, bullets have turned into water by the grace of Gandhiji. They were not scared. The people were so motivated to picket the police station and to enforce the Asahyog or non-cooperation that they did not even fear the bullets. And so the police fired into the crowd, killing 3 people and injuring many others. And so, as a result of this, a volcano of anger then erupted. There was heavy brick batting and the policemen were forced to flee inside the Thana. So now you have a scene where all the policemen in that village have been locked inside the Thana. And so the crowd, which is already very angered, proceeded to douse the building with kerosene and to set it on fire. Some of the policemen who tried to escape were caught and battered to death. Some others managed to escape by throwing away their conspicuous red turbans, which the angry crowd tore to shreds. A lot of police property, including weapons, were destroyed. The volunteers saw the abolition of the Thana as the sign of arrival of Gandhi Raj. Now we can easily guess what would have happened or what would have been reaction from the British Raj in the days succeeding this event. The severely rattled establishment of Raj prosecuted the accused aggressively, raids were carried out, repressions became more stronger, lists of volunteers were compiled and they were arrested en masse. A Sessions court quickly sentenced as many as 172 accused to death. Ultimately, 19 of these convicted were sent to gallows. Gandhiji, who was a firm believer in non-violence, was deeply disturbed by this particular incident. Also condemned the crime. He used the word crime for this incident, and as a reaction to this, the volunteer groups in the nearby villages were disbanded and a Chauri Chaura support fund was set up to demonstrate the genuine sympathy and seek the atonement. And Chauri Chaura movement became a milestone in India's struggle for independence because following this and as a result of this incident, Gandhiji decided to stop the non-cooperation movement because he saw the whole movement taking a violent turn. He saw as having been tainted by unforgivable violence. He bent the Congress Working Committee to his will because he had the power and the support, and on February 12th, that is a week after this particular incident, the Satyagraha was formally suspended. So this whole discussion is very important for mains examination as well as for prelims examination, where you are expected to understand the sequence of events which led to the Chauri Chaura incident and its outcome, or the impact which it had on India's national movement. Then a very interesting article, although motivated by politics, appears in Indian Express on 2nd of February. What TMC means when it calls the BJP Bargis. Now, terms like these are very important from the perspective of prelims examination. Consider this, a very recent 2020 prelims examination example. With reference to history of India, Ulgulan or the Great Tumult is the description of which of the following events? Revolt of 1857, the Mopla Rebellion of 1921, the Indigo Rebellion of 1859, Birsa Munda's Revolt of 1899 to 1900. And of course the right answer was D. Again, to re-emphasize the same point, that how newspaper reading helps in the revision of the static as well. And so here we will understand the meaning of the term Bagis and Silhedas and what they mean in context of India's late medieval or early modern history. Simply speaking, the word Bagi refers to cavalrymen in Maratha and Mughal armies. The word comes from Persian Bargir, literally meaning the burden taker. So in order to understand the context, you will have to focus on this particular map, where the saffron color shows the extent to which the Marathas controlled the Indian territory in 18th century. And this blue color, although here, denotes the British territory of Bengal, but just before that it was controlled by Ali Wardi Khan, the ruler of Bengal. And so in order to gain more and more territories, there were multiple Marathas invasions into the province of Bengal, which resulted in looting, plundering and massacres in what was then the Mughal territory. And so the happenings of this specific period have affected Bengal's consciousness to the extent that they have an established presence in Bengali folklore as well as in literature. And the term Bagis is used as a casual reference to troublesome outside forces because these invasions were led by Bargis, who were cavalrymen, or a soldier who rode a horse furnished by his employer. So in Maratha cavalry, any able-bodied person could enlist as a Bagir. But if he had the means to buy his own horse and a military outfit, then he would be called as Silhedar. So an important difference between these two people is that Bagis ride on a horse provided by the army, whereas Silhedar is one step or one notch higher because he possessed his own horse. And so as soon as Marathas saw the Mughals' declining state, they started to scramble their forces to secure taxation rights in Odisha and Bengali territory. And over the course of next 20 to 30 years, that is starting 1741 and going up to 1760, there were multiple raids which were carried out by Marathas led by Bargis. And since then, in Bengali folklore, the outside troublesome makers are known by the name of Bargis. And now since BJP has put all its forces to capture the Bengal Legislative Assembly, the current ruling dispensation, the Trinamool Congress, have referred to them as Bargis. What is Stardust 1.0? The first rocket to run on biofuel. So on January 31st, Stardust 1.0 was launched from Loring Commerce Center in Maine. which happens to be a former military base of United States of America, and hence becoming the first commercial space launch powered by a biofuel which is non-toxic for the environment as opposed to traditionally used rocket fuels. Just to give you an idea that this is powered by biofuel, and so it cannot be very large, and so the rocket is just 20 feet tall and has a mass of roughly 250 kgs. The rocket can carry a maximum payload of 8 kgs and during its first launch carried 3 payloads. Now the payloads were mainly for the school students, a CubeSat prototype built by high school students, a metal alloy designed to lessen vibrations which is developed by Kellogg's Research Labs, and a CubeSat from software company Rocket Insights. These things are not important. What is important is what is a Stardust and its important quality that it has become the first commercial space launch powered by biofuel. Now what is the importance of CubeSat-1 or these smaller rockets? Now these rockets will help to launch small satellites called CubeSats into space in a way that is relatively very cheap than using traditional rocket fuel that is very expensive and also toxic for environment. Apart from that, the accommodation of mini payloads provide easier access to space to not only experienced researchers, because increasingly the established companies like NASA and various other space exploration companies are resorting to these smaller rockets, but also to students who are a part of educational institutions and are working to develop their own space programs. But apart from CubeSats, there are other companies working towards making access to space easier. One of them is Amazon founder Jeff Bezos' space company called Blue Origin. Last year in October, the company tested a rocket called New Shepard. The rocket system is meant to take tourists to space and offers flights to space over 100 km above Earth and accommodation for payloads as well. And these kinds of efforts are a part of growing number of commercial space companies that are working to provide easier and cheaper access to space to lay people, and also to make access to space cost effective for the purpose of academic research, corporate technology development and entrepreneurial ventures among others. Apart from this, there is another company owned by British entrepreneur Richard Branson called Virgin Galactic, which has recently signed a Space Act agreement with NASA's Johnson Space Center in June 2020 to encourage commercial participation in orbital human spaceflight to International Space Station and to help in development of low Earth orbit economy. As far as UPSC prelims examination is concerned, a direct question as to what is Stardust 1.0 can be asked. A small but a very significant news appeared in explained section on 7th of February. The vaccine passport that Denmark is going to launch. So the Denmark, along with countries in Northern Europe, have in recent years pushed for paperless communications in both public and private sector, we know that. And so in an effort to reduce curbs on travel and public life, Denmark recently announced that it is in the process of rolling out a digital passport that would show if holders have been vaccinated against the coronavirus or not. In this direction, the first step will be completed by the end of February, when Danish citizens who have been vaccinated will be able to see a record on a government health website, and then in 3 to 4 months, a digital passport and an app will be launched, and which will function as an extra passport that people can carry on their mobile devices. As far as the current situation in Denmark goes, it is under complete lockdown, non-essential retail is closed, and bars and restaurants are only permitted takeaway orders.